Can you hear me, Lynn, okay?
We can hear you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Tuesday, March 7, 2023 meeting of the Milton, Massachusetts Select Board. This is a hybrid and in-person meeting with us at the Council on Aging, Vice Chair Michael Zulis, Member Roxanne Musto, Arthur Doyle serving this year as Chair, Town Administrator Nicholas Milano, and our Executive Assistant, Lynn.
Point.
Yep, Lynn's with us. And on the hybrid by Zoom, we have two members of the Select Board, Secretary of the Select Board, Richard Wells, and Member Aaron Bradley. At this time, I'd like to ask everybody if they could join in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time in our meeting, we'd like to turn to public comment, and we'll just indicate that a public comment is a set aside of about 15 minutes at select board meetings, with each speaker having up to 3 minutes. If there are citizens who wish to join through the hybrid approach, they can do so very easily. #6 will allow them to mute and unmute, and *9 will allow them to raise their hand and lower their hand. The first person would like to invite to the table had called and asked to speak tonight. Mr. Lawfer, could you join us, please? And we just ask if you would sign in with your name and address, or state it, and then you can sign in as you have time. And we welcome you to the Select Board.
Good evening. Thank you so much for inviting me here to speak. I'm the chairman of the Local Historic District Study Committee. We were formed in September of 2021. Our methodology has been first to understand, our task was to come up with a local historic district. To do that, our methodology was to invite all stakeholders in the town and in the state who could help us understand the reasons why we would need one. We do have many historical sites here, and we, after exhaustive study, we have decided that we will choose Milton Village in our proposal. Our proposal is almost completely finished. In the next 2 weeks, we'll vote on it, and it will go to the state, where the state has 60 days to review our proposal. In that time, we are going to send letters to everyone, every property owner in the Milton Village area, and we are also going to have public meetings. We are looking forward to hearing any and all questions, and we're through the incredible work of the other 6 members and we're ready to answer the questions.
Well, thank you. At this time, we would not entertain dialogue and questions, but we do allow for comment on public comment later in the meeting. Anything else you would like to add? Please feel free to do so.
The work was really interesting, and we have on the town website, we have a survey that I ask everyone to go to and answer. What is historical? Why are things historical? What is important to you? We have stone fences that come from the 1600s. We all know Suffolk Resolves and the many, many other incredibly historic, important things. Many of them are taken care of by the federal and the state. but we have no local one. So that's why we joined with the planning board and a number of the other committees to focus on Milton Village, which has no protections. But one thing to be absolutely clear about, we have no intention of saying everybody's got to have the same color, everybody's got to have the same. We are not going to be that kind of a group. We want to protect the lifestyle of Milton. And the Milton lifestyle started as agriculture, and now we're commuter, and it's all wonderful. So we still want to think about 100 years from now, what do we want to save? Thank you so much.
Congratulations to you and to your committee.
Thank you. We will see you in public meetings, and then we get voted on by the town in a 2/3 majority. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anybody else present for public comment? Any hands raised, Mr. Milano?
No.
No hands raised at this time. So we'll move on to agenda item number 4, which is the discussion, update, and approval of annual town meeting warrant articles. 4A is with respect to an appropriation for the school building committee for inclusion on the annual town meeting. We have a proposed motion to that effect. Do we have any information, Mr. Zulus, who's the select board representative to the school building committee, on an amount that would be requested at this time?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. The school building committee voted last night to recommend an amount of up to $275,000 for, and I don't have let's see if I have my notes with me, for initial design, geotechnical review, and surveys. And there are 2 or 3 other things that are in that amount for the coming year, but that was the amount that was voted. And if we want to get a more elaborate line item view of what that's comprised of, we can surely have Mr. O'Rourke come in and talk about that. But that was the recommendation of the school building committee. If I had my notes, I could go through the 3 or 4 categories that was intended to cover, but I unfortunately don't have them with me. So.
That'd be nice to have done subsequently. Any questions of Mr. Zulus?
Mr. Wells.
Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. So, Michael, just I'll make the motion, but I think when we get to town meeting, I take it someone will be there to be able to answer these if they come up at town meeting.
Oh, absolutely. And this also, this recommendation, let me suggest this. This is going to be part of the budget, part of a recommended town administrator's budget, I believe, if it's included in that amount. And I suspect it will be from our discussions in finance. So perhaps we could vote to include the article, but wait on the amount until we vote the budget next week, just because it is part of the budget. So, and if we get out and vote a certain amount tonight, and then next week that changes, then so perhaps it's better just to vote it next week along with the budget.
I'll make a motion to move the article and then leave so I'll make a motion to include this article in the annual town meeting warrant with appropriation to be determined at a later date. How's that?
Thank you, Mr. Wells. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Ms. Musto. Has moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, by roll call vote. Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Musto?
Yes.
And Mr. Doyle, yes. Thank you. Item 4B. This is with respect to the warrant article from the Bylaw Review Committee regarding extension of the Bylaw Review Committee in an appropriation. And we have the Bylaw Committee Chair with us, Mr. Peter Milton. Welcome. It's great to have you back, Peter.
Thank you. I was here before the board back on February 22, and the question was raised by Mr. Zulus about the bylaw review committee and maybe reconstituting it. We're a committee that of 5 members who are appointed by the moderator. And the question was raised whether we should have some people on the committee appointed by the select board or not. We had a committee meeting scheduled for the next night. We did discuss that. I think the feeling, the consensus of the committee is that we're close to the end of the work that we were given. We've invested a fair amount of time and effort into it, and that we'd like to complete that work. It wasn't clear from the discussion at the select board the last time I was here as to whether the thought was to expand the committee by adding members appointed by the select board, or it was to replace people that were already on the committee with people selected by the select board. We think 5 is a good sized committee for the work that we're doing. We're fully staffed at this point. So we would ask, I think, that the board approve the article as it's drafted and send it to the warrant committee for their consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Mullen. And you also have a dollar amount for the article.
We're requesting an appropriation of $57.30. But I think at this point, I mean, I don't know that you have to put a dollar amount in it. I thought it was the warrant committee that would be the body that would be putting the dollar amount in.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Wells?
I think we do have to put, I think the warrant committee would approve the dollar. Right, to Mr. Mullen's comments, I think we have to put a dollar amount there. And I take it that 54 is 5,000, Mr. Mullen, correct?
$5,730 we have requested.
Mr. Chair, I'd make a motion to approve the article. I'm trying to read here.
Would it help if I read it for you, Mr. Wells?
Yeah, go ahead. You read it. I'm reading off like the public thing here. Not the,
Okay. This is on behalf of Mr. Wells. Move to approve the warrant article from the Bylaw Review Committee regarding extension of the Bylaw Review Committee in an appropriation in the amount of $5,730 for an inclusion on the annual town meeting warrant.
that is it. I will accept that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
It is moved. Is there a second, please?
I will second that.
Thank you, Ms. Musto. It is moved and seconded. Any discussion at this time? Mr. Zulus?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a couple of questions, Mr. Mullen. So this article would extend the bylaw review committee for 2.5 years from now through November 2025.
Yes.
Right, okay. And so has it been the same 5 members since 2015, or would they be the same 5 members until November 2025, or?
3 of us have served since the beginning. Myself, Susan Kiernan, and Ingrid Beattie. Mr. Whiteside, Alex Whiteside, joined the committee, I believe, in either late 18 or early 2019. And Tom Caldwell joined the committee like about 6 months ago.
And do we know? And I'm perhaps it's in the article from 2015, but do we know how often the members are reappointed, or is it just open-ended?
The original article, authorizes the moderator to appoint a committee of 5 members. It doesn't say anything about terms.
I see. Okay. And then going back to our discussion of 2 weeks ago, I think it was 2 weeks ago, about the work that you're doing and the work that the planning board is doing. I just want to make sure that there's no overlap there. My understanding is that the planning board, and we may have discussed it, but the planning board voted to seek $40,000 to work with general code. I think that's right. So I just wanted to make sure you're working with the planning board on that, and there's no duplication of work going on.
I don't believe there's any duplication.
Okay.
My understanding is that the planning board and the clerk's office have been working with the town administrator with general code with regard to a renumbering and recodification project, which is attempting to put in electronic form our current bylaws as they exist, with any problems that they have, any misspellings, any mistakes. And I believe that that's going to be 2 articles sponsored by the select board at the annual town meeting. The $40,000 I understood was that was a request for an appropriation by the planning board to hire an expert to look at our zoning bylaw and come up with any suggestions as to changes, either to add things, delete things, whatever. The bylaw review committee has reviewed the bylaw, but not with a view towards making substantive changes. We've only been viewing it as the organization, inserting headings, things like that, putting things in different places to kind of make more sense of the zoning bylaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mullins. That's very helpful. So I will say, with respect to the committee makeup, I understand that we've had people on the committee for a number of years and put a lot of work into it. But we do have 2.5 years more to go under this article, and it does seem we would have more transparency in terms of the appointments and the work of the committee, because we meet every 2 weeks, whereas the moderator has town meeting once or twice a year. So we could have, if the select board were part of the appointing authority, we could have a little more reporting as it was going on during that 2-year period. So it does strike me that it may make sense to have the select board as a joint appointing authority with the moderator. And what I was thinking, just to clarify from 2 weeks ago, what I was thinking was that the select board would appoint 2 or 3 of the 5 members, not to increase the membership, but to just include that as part of include the select board as kind of as a joint appointing authority with the moderator, in order to have more transparency, in order to have more reporting throughout the next 2.5 years. So I think there is some benefit to that. I don't know if the other members feel the same way, but I do think there would be some benefit to that. And we could make that change along with extending the time period for 2.5 years, appropriating the money, and then we could amend the article to provide that the select board is a joint appointing authority along with the moderator. So that's my thought. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome, Mr. Zullos. Ms. Bradley, you're recognized, and then Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to answer Mike's question. The members of this committee are appointed for the length of the committee. So they were supposed to expire every 3 years. So the members were only supposed to serve for 3 years. The town has continued to extend that time. So every time that it's extended, the members are either supposed to be reappointed or actually not reappointed, but go through a new appointment process. If the moderator chooses to appoint the same people, he can do that. But just so you know, everybody's term expires at the end of the cycle of the committee, which would be, as of now, which would be town meeting. So that's when it would expire, and then we will be renewing it starting then. So we would need all new members. And again, whether or not the moderator chooses to appoint the same people, that's up to him. But everybody's term ends at the end of the term of that committee.
Thank you, Ms. Bradley. Mr. Wells?
Yeah, Mr. Mullen, and I believe I'm correct in this. The article that created this committee, this is a town meeting created committee, states that the moderator shall appoint. Am I correct?
It does, yes.
So I think, Mr. Chair, that in both, Mr. Mullen, I think if we appointed anybody that have no vote, and I just give in an example. So I sit on the fire station building committee, but I have no vote because it's not our committee. It's the moderates committee. So that's like, I don't have a problem with this remaining a moderators committee. I hear Michael's point there. I don't have, Mr. Mullen, just to your credit, many don't know you like I do. I mean, you have found more errors and corrected more things to keep this town on firm ground, or terra firmas, than anyone I can think of regarding the operation and function of this town, particularly when it comes to bylaws and things of that nature, which, even though I'm not the town moderator, I understand how you appointed that committee and how. I think we need to think, or at least maybe the chair can have a conversation with the moderator if you're thinking about this, because I think even if we appointed a couple of select board members there, they would not have a vote when this is a moderators committee. They would be quote unquote ex officio.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. Mr. Zulus?
Thank you, Mr.
And then Ms. Musto?
Just to clarify what I was suggesting, Richard, what I was suggesting is, just as we're amending the article to extend the time, this would include an amendment to make it a joint appointed committee. So we would be amending the article from 2015, just as we're amending it to extend the time. We would amend it to say that it is a authorizing the town moderator and the select board to appoint a town bylaw review committee consisting of 5 members, for example, 2 of whom shall be appointed by the moderator, 3 of whom shall be appointed by the select board, or 3 of whom should be, one or the other. So we can make that change, and we can make it so that that this board has some say in the appointment and some ongoing oversight, and reporting from bylaw review committee over the next 2.5 years. So that's the suggestion.
Ms. Musto?
Yes, I wanted to say that I think that it should stay with the moderator appointed committee. I think that, we have our lane and he has his lane, and I feel like we're trying to gradually starting to take away some of this. And I don't think that's really the way we should be going with this. It has been run this way for a while. It's been effective. This group has been working very hard. And it's a tedious process. We know this. So I would be in favor of keeping it with the moderator and not adding any changes that we would, as select board, be putting more people on there or replacing some of the people through our appointment process. I think it's fine for this reporting to be more often, and maybe that's something that we say, that we'd like more reporting to our body for updates on how the process is going through the moderator. We have a lot of committees, and they're supposed to be reporting very often, and a lot of them aren't. So I feel that we're almost singling this one in particular out in a different kind of a way, and I'm more in favor of letting them do their work and getting this done. Thank you.
The sense of the chair is to move forward with the motion as presented at this particular point in time, but to recognize what the vice chair has put on the table and to suggest that we have subsequently a discussion with the town moderator. And there's plenty of time, fall, special town meeting, etc., to bring something forward if it turns out to be an amenable recommendation to all parties that would be involved. Would this make sense? But for now, follow what we have as a motion. That is.
Why don't you make the motion, Mr. Chair?
I'll read it. We'll read it for you. But I wanted to also ask Mr. Mullen, in the context of this conversation, if, considering the information that you provided to us when you were last with us in February about some of the delays in startup and the impact of the pandemic on the committee and so on down the line, if you would be willing to periodically visit with the select board for an update on the work of the bylaw committee.
We'd absolutely be willing to do that, yes.
Thank you for that. Mr. Walls, I'll read, I think.
If you read that, I'll make it if you read it, because I don't know.
Mr. Wells, the motion has been made and seconded. So at this point in time, seeing no further discussion, the chair will entertain a roll call vote. Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
Mr. Wells,
Yes.
Ms. Bradley,
No.
Ms. Musto,
Yes.
Mr. Doyle, yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Mullen.
Thank you.
We look forward to seeing you back with us in the not too distant future. And see you in May. At this time, the select board, and by the way, I should mention that town council Kevin Freitag has joined the meeting. And at this time, I would like to note that we will be joined by members of the Airplane Noise Advisory Committee. Its chair, Katie Conlon, will call that meeting to order. We will then go into executive session. They will go into executive session. We will have executive session in a separate room in this building. The first item of business in executive session will be the Airplane Noise Advisory Committee. When that is completed, they will adjourn and we will continue with two other matters of business that will be introduced by way of motion in a few minutes. So if Katie is with us, I see Mr. Papek is with us. Welcome, Raj.
Thanks, Arthur.
Chair Conlon is joining us. Welcome, Katie.
Good evening, Chair Doyle and members of the Select Board. And good evening, Raj. So, Mr. Chair, I don't know if we have any, if Mr. Schmidt, Andy Schmidt is in the attendee group, or Chris Hart. We weren't expecting Chris to be here due to a prior commitment. I don't see Mr. Schmidt. We're a 4-member committee. The committee could have up to 5 members, but there are 4 presently appointed. So with just Mr. Pathak and myself, we would not be a quorum of the Airplane Noise Advisory Committee. And we did have a little bit of a timing issue this evening where, Mr. Pathak is available until a certain hour and Mr. Schmidt was going to be available a little bit later. So we weren't sure if we would have a quorum, but we went ahead and posted a notice for the meeting. My understanding is we can just, if we don't have a quorum, then the committee itself, the Airplane Noise Advisory Committee, would not be meeting, but individually, Mr. Pathak and I could join you if you would so desire, individually. Actually, I see Mr. Schmidt now.
Yes. So you now have your quorum, Madam Chair.
We now have a quorum. All right. So we are joining your hybrid meeting by Zoom. So we'll call to order the meeting of the Airplane Noise Advisory Committee meeting jointly with the Select Board. Since we're on Zoom, I believe I need to read the statement that Governor Baker on July 16th, 2022 signed into law an act relative to extending certain state of emergency accommodations, extending the expiration of certain provisions of the open meeting law to March 31st, 2023. So my name is Katie Conlon. I'm the chair of the Airplane Noise Advisory Committee. We're joined by Mr. Pathak and Mr. Schmidt, and we're calling our meeting to order. And we thank you for inviting us this evening.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And at this time, we will move on the part of the Select Board to enter into executive session. There will be 3 motions that will be taken by roll call vote. And after the Select Board finishes those 3 motions, we invite you to move your committee into executive session. Is that satisfactory?
Thank you.
Clear? Okay, thank you. At this time, the chair will move to enter into executive session to discuss litigation strategy with respect to litigation filed by the town of Milton versus the Federal Aviation Administration, number 22-152, U.S. Court of Appeals, First Circuit, based on my belief that discussion of this matter in open session may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the select board. The select board will return to open session. Is there a motion? The motion has been made. Is there a second to the motion, please?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Zulus. Any discussion? Seeing none. Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Stepped away.
Ms. Bradley?
Stepped away.
Ms. Musto?
Yes.
And Mr. Doyle, yes. The next motion is with respect to strategy relative to the Massachusetts Bay Transit Authority in litigation. I move to enter into executive session to discuss litigation strategy against the Massachusetts Bay Transit Authority, MBTA, related to the condition of the stairs at the MBTA station located at Adams Street, Milton, Massachusetts, based on my belief that discussion of this matter in open session may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the select board. And again, the select board will return to open session. This time, I'd like to entertain a second to the motion.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Zulus. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Mr. Wells? Not with us. Ms. Bradley? Ms. Musto?
Yes.
And Mr. Doyle, yes. And at this time, I'll read a motion with respect to real property of the Kidder Branch Library. I move to enter into executive session to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property located at 101 Blue Hills Parkway, Kidder Branch Library, based on my belief that discussion of this matter in open session may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the select board. And again, the select board will move into open session. Is there a second to the motion, please?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Ms. Musto. Moved and seconded, and seeing no discussion, by roll call vote. Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Mr. Wells is absent. Ms. Bradley is not with us at this time. Ms. Musto?
Yes.
And Mr. Doyle, yes. Thank you. At this time, Chair Conlon, I can turn to you for your motion to go into executive session.
Thank you, Chair Doyle. So I will move that the Airplane Noise Advisory Committee moved into executive session pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to litigation filed by the Town of Milton versus the Federal Aviation Administration, case number 22-152, pending in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the First Circuit, believing that having such discussion in open session would have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the Select Board, which is being assisted by the Airplane Noise Advisory Committee, which is an advisory committee to the Select Board. Our committee would not return to open session and has no other items on the agenda. We would adjourn from the executive session, excuse me. Do we have a second to that motion?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Schmidt. All in favor? Mr. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mr. Pathak?
Yes.
And myself, yes. So the Airplane Noise Advisory Committee is now in executive session.
As is the select board meeting as well, so we will move to the adjacent room for the executive session and then return following executive session. Thank you. The select board has adjourned from executive session and has returned to open session. I'd like at this particular point in time to return to item 4 on the agenda. We had item 4C, a potential warrant article for a historic district bylaw from the Historic District Study Committee. We heard from their chair and public comment earlier. Mr. Milano, do you want to provide an update on this article?
Sure, we had been holding a potential warrant article as a placeholder for the Historic District Study Committee. As Mr. Loeffler indicated, they are still working through some of their processes that they have to follow, so this warrant article would not be moving forward for the annual town meeting in May.
Thank you, Mr. Milano. This time, let us turn to item number 8, discussion approval policies and decorum at public meetings in Milton. we had during the select board meeting agenda planning session with Mr. Milano, Mr. Zulus, Mr. Freytag, and myself, an orientation to collapsing part of what was discussed at the last meeting into a generic overarching document that might be approved by the select board. So at this particular point in time, in the absence of that, in the presence of a ruling from a Superior Court yesterday, and additional information that Roxanne has provided today, what I'd like to suggest to the select board is that we defer this to our April 21st meeting.
I'm fine on that.
Okay.
March 21st?
What did I say? April?
You said April.
Oh, man, I'm getting ahead of myself. Talk about wishful thinking. Look at Michael. He's got me. March 21st. Thank you. Number 9, discussion approval, Mass DOT letter to the town of Milton regarding the Randolph Ave Chickatobit Road project. Mr. Milano?
Sure. The town received a response to its letter from in the fall regarding the proposed project at Randolph Ave, Route 28 and Chickatobit Road, the proposed roundabout by Mass DOT. We did get a lengthy response from Mass DOT. Kind of the big picture takeaways was that Mass DOT did indicate that the preferred alternative remains the roundabout design. There was additional comments in it that they're committed to performing further analysis to evaluate the entire corridor for some interim improvements and studying the entire corridor for safety. So that's the response that we've gotten, kind of at a really high level summary. Happy to hear any questions or comments from the board in terms of any potential next steps.
Anything from members of the board? Ms. Musto?
Yes, I'm just wondering if we have any specific questions, if we could email them to you, Mr. Milano, to reach out to DOT. Because I think at the end of that letter, it did mention if you had any questions that you could follow up. So if we come across any, could we do that?
Of course.
Thank you.
I mentioned to Mr. Milano yesterday, I believe, that when driving through the intersection at Chickatobit and Route 28 at the end of last week, I saw some big flag stakes on the south side of Chickatobit on either side of 28. So something might be underway, and we want to see if anybody has information on any surveying, et cetera, that might be in progress. And by the way, on the previous topic, I said Superior Court, I meant the Supreme Judicial Court ruling of yesterday. I apologize for that. Anything further by anybody on this particular topic? Seeing none, let's turn at this time to agenda item number 10, which is an update on the Select Board Finance Committee. And Mr. Zulus, could we turn to you for this, and Ms. Bradley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since this board met, I think we've met twice, last Monday and this Monday, this past Monday, yesterday morning. We have had some additional good news in that and Mr. Milano can provide some additional detail and answer questions about the fact that our health insurance rates are not going to go up. There's going to be a zero increase, which was a savings of about $750,000. Savings meaning we had plugged a potential expense of $750,000 for an increase to health insurance, and now that is not an additional expense. So that's $750,000 to the good. And combining that with free cash number that we talked about in our last meeting, and the additional state aid that the town received above and beyond what we had budgeted initially. The town administrator's budget at the level service level is balanced. And now we have moved forward to the needs-based budget, which is approximately $2.7 million in deficit on the needs-based side. And we do have some variables that we're still looking at on the revenue side and on the expense side and on different budgeted items, including how much we put into stabilization, if any, including the additional unallocated free cash. So there are still some variables that we're looking at to try to mitigate that $2.7 million needs-based deficit. We have scheduled an additional meeting on Friday morning. We asked the operational folks in the town administrator's office and the school department's office, the superintendent's office, superintendent of schools office to work on the numbers further. And so our goal is to try to get a consensus among those finance committees. And then if we can get a consensus among this board and the school committee to bring to the warrant committee next Wednesday, that's the goal. Doesn't always happen, may not happen, but that's what we're driving towards. So we have a meeting scheduled Friday morning, and then we have a meeting penciled in for next Tuesday morning, the 14th. And so our suggestion to this board is that we schedule a meeting for next Tuesday evening, at which we may be in a position to vote on a recommendation from the finance committee of this board, and then again with the goal of being in the position by the warrant committee meeting on the 15th to make a recommendation. Again, it's the town administrator's budget. Select board usually indicates its support or non-support for the town administrator's budget, as does the school committee in front of the warrant committee. So that's our goal, to see if we can get to that point by the 15th.
Anything that Ms. Bradley wants to add?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nope, I think Mr. Zulus nailed that on the head.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Wells, you have a question?
So, Michael, what's the double, like what's from the level dollar to what's left?
It's you mean in terms of specifics?
Yeah, how much money's left that could be allocated?
Well, it depends, right? Right now in the current budget, we have $1 million going into stabilization.
Okay.
In the current budget, we have unallocated free cash of $350,000.
Okay.
So that's another variable. We have line items for the opioid settlement to come from free cash in the amount of $155,000. Question whether we need to do that. We have a wage set aside.
Right.
And that money has already been appropriated for this fiscal year, so it will roll over into the next fiscal year. So that's another variable, it seems to me. So we have some variables to work on, and I think it's fair to say that the town administrator, is still working on the expense side too, with the budgets, with the departments. So I think we still have some variables to mix and match and move around, and to try to eat into that needs-based deficit.
How about ARPA? Have we? Is that all designated now at this point? Because it's the last year, but right?
Yeah, it's a good point, and I failed to mention it. The
ARPA funds?
No, the balanced. Looking for that word. The balanced level service budget includes
Some ARPA money.
the use
Okay, okay.
the use of the final ARPA funds.
Okay. I knew it was there. I just,
Yes.
when you didn't mention it, I'm like, okay.
Yes.
Is that in
That's exactly-
reserve or is that
Yeah,
like
no,
already dedicated?
that's already been used. Yeah.
So clearly, if you could, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. So clearly, so for department heads in on the school side, this is an exercise, as you know, going even back to that has been used here many times over the years. So from an operational and a strategic point of view, this is what you've just outlined is a way to survive another year. To get through, to meet is a level service and then fill what you can in needs based, and then, not have to even talk about. It doesn't take away, like I know you had mentioned in the prior meeting, if you filled all the requests, I think you're like a $4 million, right? $4 million.
We were 6.
Well, $6 million, but those needs never go away. They still exist. So it's a way to get through this year, but at some point we're going to have to address it.
So it's a good point, Richard. And the big picture is that the extraordinary amount of free cash
This year.
1 year, one time, the unusual savings on health insurance,
Right.
one time this year, the additional state aid, perhaps one time, maybe not. That has put us in the position where we have some variables to as you say, to get through another year without an override.
Right.
I think there's a consensus among those of us who've been discussing it, the finance committees of the school committee, finance committee, and our finance committee. I think there's a view that we are filling the gaps, some of the gaps that still remain from COVID. And we're filling the gaps this year with some of those extraordinary funding opportunities. But that's not sustainable because a lot of it's based on one-time money. So I think it's fair to say that in our meetings, we've come to the view that if the town wants to continue the services that are outlined in this budget, and it wants those to be sustainable, there likely would be an override next year. It's hard to see that there wouldn't, absent, again, some kind of extraordinary free cash, some kind of extraordinary event, which you can't bank on.
Which we all pray for, though. You can't bank. You're right.
You can't bank on.
But you have to. I mean, you're right in that. For as long as I can remember, and whatever role I've been in, this topic that you're talking about is always up here. Right. It's never in the back of the. It's always up. It's always very much in the forefront.
It's always there. We've been fortunate since 2009, where we've only that's 14 years, and we've only had to do it once. And I think that's in part because we've budgeted conservatively, and frankly, we've gone without things.
That's correct.
And our departments have gone without things, and all of our departments, including the schools, including the police and fire and the library, they've gone without things. So I think there's a strong view of the finance committees that the town should be able to say whether the town residents want to continue to go without some of these things. And that would be next year.
Thank you.
I just make the observation that budgetarily, based upon your report, we're in a far better position right now than we thought we would be when we were having conversations a year ago.
Yes.
And that's the credit to everybody who's involved.
It is. It's a credit, but I think it's also, Mr. Chair, it's we've been lucky, and we've had some extraordinary one-time items that have allowed us to get in a position where hopefully we can.
As you said, we can bank those this year, but we can't. Well, next year, but we can't anticipate this will happen ever again in the future.
It's certainly unprecedented in my experience. And Roxanne, I don't know if you ever heard about $4.4 million of free cash in your experience. So
No.
I think it's,
It hasn't happened in the last 20 years. So
yeah. So I think, this is unprecedented. It's allowed us to try to meet the needs of the town without an override, but we can't expect it to happen again, and we can't expect it to happen next year.
Great. One last question from me is whether or not we have heard anything from Norfolk County yet as to any anticipated ARPA surplus at the county level.
Nick will have the update on that if any.
So we haven't heard anything. They've continued to raise the possibility that some communities might not draw down their full allotment, in which case there may be money that's reallocated out to other communities that have used their full allotment. One thing they have done is revise their there's a bucket of money under the Treasury rules that can be used for basically any governmental purpose under what's called a calculation based on revenue loss. The Norfolk County has revised their models under revenue loss category, and that means all of the town's remaining funds that's held by the Treasury is now eligible to be used on anything that's a governmental purpose. It's not subject to the tighter restrictions that a lot of the money was subject to up until this point. So we have complete flexibility with the remaining funds, which is helpful for us, and we're not constrained to some of the bigger categories such as water and sewer infrastructure. It can be pushed in any direction, really. That's a governmental purpose.
As do the other communities in Norfolk County, which means that there may be less of an opportunity for a large surplus than there would have been.
Potentially. In one of the communities,
we'll keep our eye on that.
I was speaking to one of the communities who hasn't drawn down most of their money, and they said, "Oh, don't worry, we'll use it all." So it was worth a shot.
I was going to say, did you get the routing number on the checking account?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Member Bradley has raised her hand.
Thank you. Ms. Bradley. You're recognized.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Nick, for noticing that. I appreciate it. I had a couple of things that I just wanted to say about the budget. And first, I wanted to ask a question. Nick, do you know how much we currently have in the stabilization fund?
It's about $4.8 million, including the money that was voted into it in this fiscal year.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. So, and Mr. Zulus, I'm not sure if you already said this. I might have missed it. But with all the town departments and their needs-based budget, right now, if we were to not put anything in stabilization or any of the other funding, we'd only be around $700,000 short to meet the needs of our town as our department heads are requesting at this current point in time. So I just want to point that out and point out that this is something that our neighbors and our townspeople have been asking for quite some time, to have, traffic mitigation, to have all these other points. And we're at a point where we have this unicorn of a $4.4 million, pennies from heaven almost. And it's one of those times where we can see if we actually fund all the needs of our town departments, what that does for our quality of life here in Milton. And then we can make an educated decision come next year on the override on what we would like to do. So I just wanted to point that out as a little aside, because I do believe if we shake some trees, we can find that additional $700,000. So I just wanted to give that pitch. So thank you so much.
Thank you. No further discussion on item number 10. We'll turn to item number 11, which is a discussion and update on capital improvement planning committee recommendations for the fiscal year 2024 capital budget. Richard, we turn to you, Mr.
We're not
Wells.
spending any money this year. I'll make a motion to give it all to Michael's committee. So I'm just going to be brief, and then I'm going to hand this over to Nick. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, the capital committee, I think we had $6 million in requests this year. And I believe I always refer to our illustrious Consolidated Facilities Director, Bill Ritchie, who, even though and sadly this will be his last year on the committee, who always looks at the town's capital needs from a 30,000-foot view. And, when you think about it, we have over $50 million in property and assets that the town owns, and it's a lot. It's one thing to build on those schools, it's another thing to take care of them. And this building here that we're in, and the new fire station's coming, all of the assets and infrastructure. So just before I hand it to Nick, I really want to thank this committee. Works really hard. Some of the more veteran members, John Focarelli, Lorraine D., Michael Hale, Bill Ritchie, have worked so tirelessly on this for so many years. I just want to thank them. I also want to thank Betty White, I'm sorry, Betty White, Meredith Hall, Laurie Conley, who came on this year, who replaced Kathy Cassis, who spent so many years and was so good on this committee and really is able to see our capital needs big picture. And especially my special thanks go out to who is back with us, who is Amy Dexter, our Chief Financial Officer, who does such a good job looking at the big picture and finding a way to make this work. So I'd be remiss in not thanking all of them for waking up at 6:45 on our Thursday mornings to make our 7 o'clock meetings. So with that, and I want to thank Nick as well, who, even though he's not a voting member, attended every one of our meetings so far this year. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, Nick, and I'll let you go through the nuts and bolts of what we're presenting here tonight.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Wells. So just to highlight where the funding is going, as we've discussed a bit tonight with that surplus and free cash, it was an opportunity to fund more capital projects than we might otherwise. We are also utilizing debt authorization to bond certain capital items, but keeping an eye on what those debt service costs will be in future year. We don't want to overload that and then have big jumps in our debt service budget in future years. So we're trying to have a smooth and steady increase to where our debt service will go for capital projects. The long and short of it is, for the most part, what we're doing in this capital budget is replacing existing equipment or making improvements to existing facilities. It's not a lot of new items. It's mostly to replace equipment before they go way past their useful life. Some of the highlights of that would be $1 million into roadway construction, which is pretty typical. That will be borrowed. This year, we're adding $100,000 for larger traffic calming projects. That would be borrowed as well, to start putting money not only to just paving, but also to incorporate potential small traffic calming projects throughout the town through the capital budget. Fire engine replacement, we try to replace those engines every 5 years. So we have 3 active engines and 1 reserve that cycle through on a 5-year rotation. So the oldest is in the range of about 20 years old. So engine number 1 is up for replacement this year. As you'll recall, the tower was authorized last year at $1.6 million, and that is something that's replaced on a more of a 20-year life cycle. The engines are on a 5-year rotation. A couple other things to point out: a new salt shed down at DPW. We had been carrying this as a fiscal 25 project, but based on just the age of that facility, we did move that forward to this fiscal year. We have it at about $1 million. We anticipate that cost will actually be lower, but just to be conservative at this stage, to make sure that we have the funding necessary to do that project, we have it in at $1 million. This capital budget goes across all the town departments. So, there's good projects going on at the school facilities as well as town facilities. Close to $500,000 in Chromebooks to keep up with their 20% replacement cycle. At the school side, additional projects throughout the town facilities. And the last one I'll mention is $200,000 to be borrowed for a financial software upgrade. Software system that the accounting department, our payroll, accounts payable, and human resources uses is quite old. To upgrade that is expensive, but it's necessary. We're on an extremely outdated SoftWrite system that is no longer being supported. We can have problems fixed, but that's about the extent of it. There are no updates coming. So that is a replacement, but something somewhat new. So I just wanted to flag that. And then the last page of the materials that were included in the packet is the items that were deferred. So some things we obviously couldn't roll into this budget this time around. We'll look to prioritizing them for the next fiscal year. So that's kind of a big picture view as to where things stand on the capital budget. Happy to take any questions if anyone has one.
I'm fine. I just want to follow up on one thing, just so that everyone knows. The 5-year capital plan request from 24 to 28 is $123.3 million, and it's broken down with, and I think this first number is a conservative, it's $75 million for a new school building project, $19.2 million school facilities improvements and upgrades, $6.6 million to some of the things that Ms. Bradley talked about, to DPW infrastructure, roads, sidewalks, traffic mitigation, calming measures, $6.5 million to parks infrastructure improvements, upgrades, field, court reconstruction, possible new teen center. $6 million on DPW building site improvements and upgrades, $10 million department equipment, technology, and vehicles. So that's $123 million, 0.8 requested over the next 5 years. That just goes to show you just how significant an operation we run here on the town. So I just want to thank Nick for all his help. I'm fine with that. And again, thank you again to the committee and especially to Amy for all her hard work.
Any comments? No?
I think we're going to the
Thank
warrant
you.
committee next week. Next week, Nick? When are we going to the warrant committee?
We'll let you know.
All right, good.
Item number 12 is discussion approval opioid settlements. There are two parts to this. One is an agreement with the involved firms. The second is settlement funds and appropriations. And at this time, I'd like to turn to Mr. Milano.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. If the board will recall, the town of Milton has signed the settlements with Johnson & Johnson and the other distributors. That money is already starting to flow to the state and through the state to the municipalities. There were additional settlements announced by the states that are involved in this class action lawsuits against different companies involved in the opioid pandemic that we're still continuing to experience. Teva Pharmaceutical, Allergan Pharmaceutical, as well as Walgreens, Walmart, and CVS are the new settlements. This money would start flowing to Milton in fiscal 24, beginning in July or August. Approximately $75,000 of additional monies. About $45,000 in additional monies, possibly close to 55, depending on once the Walmart numbers are finalized. That will start coming. That's in addition to the other payments that are already flowing to Milton. So we're looking at a total of about $1.3 to $1.4 million between now and fiscal 2038 in total settlement payments. The money is restricted in terms of how it can be used, and the town has to make reports on an annual basis as to how it does use those monies. There's a guidance document that the state has put out that clarifies and explains municipal allowed uses of these settlement abatement funds. So that's the five agreements that are before us now, and with this board's approval, I will execute those and return them so that the town is party to these settlements.
There's a motion to that effect in our materials. Does anybody wish to move?
I don't have, but you got it, Michael.
Sure, I'll make a motion to approve the opioid settlement agreements with Teva, Allergan, Walgreens, Walmart, and CVS, and authorize the town administrator to execute the settlement participation forms.
Second.
Mrs. Zulus, seconded Mr. Wells. Thank you. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Musto?
Yes.
And Mr. Doyle? Thank you. And Nick, to the settlement funds and appropriation.
Sure. As Mr. Zulus alluded earlier, we have received some money already in this fiscal year. More money is expected to flow in right now. Reviewing and considering the best place to appropriate those monies under the law and the way that the Department of Revenue is treating these funds. Once appropriated, they then remain eligible to be used for that expense until the funds are expended. It's not like something that will go to free cash, then have to be appropriated, and at the end of the year, close to free cash and be reappropriated. So in terms of some flexibility that we don't typically see on all of our monies, this is one place where once town meeting votes to appropriate it to a department or to a board or a committee, it would remain under that board or committee's purview until those funds are expended. I have had a conversation with the health director about whether an appropriate place is the health department under the Board of Health. I know the Board of Health is taking up that conversation next Monday night, and then we can have a conversation after they've met, and we can revisit at that point, and we can include it perhaps on next Tuesday night's agenda.
Thank you.
This is the money. Sorry, this is the monies to
Yes.
put the monies on them. Okay.
Exactly. Everybody agree?
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Milano. Now we'll turn to 13, which is the Shared Housing Services Office intermunicipal agreement, and we have our Director of Planning and Community Development with us, coming with us,
Yes,
Tim
he'll be-
Zawinski.
Who's joining now?
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you. Welcome.
Yes, thank you for having me, and thank you for taking up this item tonight. Just by way of a little bit of background, and some of you may remember, but I think we may have some new members since the last time this came up. My department's been working with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council via the Three Rivers Interlocal Council, which is one of the two subregions that Milton is a part of, to develop what's known as a shared housing services office. And what that is, if you look at some of the larger cities in the region, City of Boston, City of Cambridge, City of Quincy, have sort of multiple members of a fully staffed housing department, usually under their housing and community development departments, and these staff people do things like monitor compliance of affordable housing units and develop programs and assist with intake for various rental assistance programs. We don't have such a thing in town of Milton. It's me, it's the assistant town planner, it's the planning clerk. With assistance from some of our colleagues in other towns via the South Shore Home Consortium. What a shared housing services office does, it's a kind of a regional governance type of operation where multiple towns that may not have the budget capacity or really need for a full-time housing compliance staff person will pull their resources, put out an RFP for a consultant and bring on someone that can kind of take all of the little pieces of housing work that each of these towns have and sort of cobble them together into a sort of a full-time equivalent position. So we're working with 6 other municipalities in our region, and it's a fun group. Bellingham, Hopkinton, Medfield, Norwood, Randolph, and Sharon. We've been working with MAPC for a little more than a year to kind of put together, the scope of work that we're interested in, and really work on an RFP that Hopkinton, which is sort of the lead municipality in the group, will issue and kind of work on our behalf. And so the legal structure of this, at the outset is this intermunicipal agreement for the creation and maintenance of the Swap Trick Shared Housing Services Office. And this is basically the agreement that binds us to these other municipalities in this project. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at it. This was put together by MAPC's Municipal Services Department. This is the type of document that they have a lot of experience with. The Metropolitan Area Planning Council does a lot of work on regional planning, regional governance, regional cost sharing, purchasing, procurement, all sorts of things like this. So this is really bread and butter stuff for them. And what they've asked is for each of the participating municipalities to review this document and to approve it. What I would ask is if you've got any questions or any comments that are of a really substantive nature, we can certainly talk about them. But this is something that's been vetted at the regional level and is really something that MAPC believes is going to work for us and our partner municipalities. And, in order to get an RFP together in a timely way before the end of the fiscal year, we'd like to get this intermunicipal agreement approved and signed and back over to MAPC. So I'm happy to take any additional questions.
Thank you. The floor is open. Anyone? Yes, please, Roxanne.
I have a quick question. Thank you. I was wondering if town council has reviewed this.
Yes, it's been provided for town council's review and feedback.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the Shared Housing Services Office intermunicipal agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. Is there a second, please?
I will second.
Thank you, Ms. Musto. Moved and seconded. Seeing no discussion, roll call vote.
One
Yes, I'm
question.
sorry, Mr. Zulus. Thank you.
Tim, did you say this was a fun group?
I thought.
Yeah, it's a fun group of municipalities.
Great. Okay.
I thought I heard him use the word trick.
Did you use the word trick?
So there are two sub-regions that are
Certain
involved
words
in
jump
this.
out at me, Tim. That one jumped out when I heard trick.
TRIC is the Three Rivers Interlocal Council. SWAP
Okay.
is the Southwest Advisory
All right, I got
Planning
it.
Group.
Okay.
They have names of these groups.
Okay.
Any other questions? No. Okay.
Good to know.
You're all
Good
happy.
to know we're part of a fun group.
Let's move to seconded. Mr. Zulus.
Yes.
Mr. Wallace.
Yes.
Ms. Bradley.
Yes.
Ms. Musto.
Yes.
And Mr. Doyle, yes. Thank you. And Tim, we
Thank you.
Appreciate the work that you and others put into this. It raises a question in my mind. Mr. Milano, in the meetings with Norfolk County, is there much discussion in the way of shared services among county communities that we should be thinking of for the future? And it's sort of a rhetorical question. I don't want to tie you down on it now, but I'd just be curious if that's part of the agenda in some of the county meetings.
It has been, and it's a place where they respond to what municipalities are looking for. The big one is actually weight and measures assistance. A lot of communities can't bring on somebody to do weights and measures for a couple $1,000s a year. So the county has stepped in to try to regionalize that effort at their level. And that's driven from feedback from cities and towns who, when their weights and measures person retires, it's hard to find people these days. So they're responsive to requests. So it's stuff that when things come up, they are responsive. It's a good relationship that's back and forth right now.
Thank you. Item number 14, local initiative program applications for local action units. A, 2 condo units at 34 Fairbanks Road, required by the Walcott Woods special permit. Brings back memories. Tim, could you elaborate on this one for us, please?
Certainly. So oftentimes when the town passes new zoning for either townhouse or multifamily development, we will include what's referred to as an inclusionary zoning requirement, so that a certain number of deed restricted affordable units need to be provided by each project. It's a familiar conversation. I think everyone knows what I'm talking about when we talk about this. And so the Walcott Woods project down on Canton Ave, which is currently under construction on the former Carberry estate, is responsible for 6 affordable units. And those units are provided off-site. That was the arrangement that was negotiated in the special permit. There are currently Northland Residential has currently provided 2 affordable units so far. I believe the address is 92 Brush Hill Road. We had a successful LIP application and lottery for those, and those are currently occupied by eligible households. The next 2 units are in a 2-family house on Fairbanks Road, right around the corner from Town Hall. The process of getting those authorized by DHCD includes an application under what's called the Local Initiative Program, which is basically any affordable unit that's not created by 40B. And so you've got this rather lengthy application that includes a lot of information about the units and more importantly about the lottery and the marketing plan for those units. And this is an element of the application that was reviewed by the Affordable Housing Trust. They've made a recommendation that the select board approve the application. They think that the lottery and the marketing plan is good. And so if the select board approves this tonight, we'll get it over to DHCD for their approval, at which point Northland and their agent can start to go through the process of marketing the lottery and making sure that everyone that is eligible for these home ownership units has a chance to kind of put their hat in the ring and potentially get them. It's a great location, as anyone that has been to Town Hall knows. It's a great part of town. And the units are in actually really, really good condition, really minimal repairs that Northland has had to make. So it would be a great opportunity for 2 eligible families.
Thank you, Tim. Any questions from Mr. Sawinski on this item?
This is the same procedure we took in the first 2, correct, Tim?
The exact same procedure.
So I'll make a motion, Mr. Chair, to approve the local initiative program applications for local action units, specifically 2 condo units at 34 Fairbanks Road, as were required by Walcott Woods special permit.
And authorize the chair to sign.
And authorize the chair to sign on our behalf.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zulus. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Musto?
Yes.
And Mr. Doyle, yes.
Sorry, Tim.
That's all right, Tim. You're probably feeling it too. Item number 15, animal shelter request for proposals update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple things. Just want to make sure that the select board is apprised of our progress on getting an RFP together. I don't know if I had a chance to send over the updated schedule that our project manager provided, but we are slated to. The schedule that we're on now is has a date for advertising the RFP of Wednesday, April 12th. That's bumped out a few weeks from our original estimate when we first started getting moving on the RFP. A couple reasons for that, and I just want to assure the select board that we're making progress here. We're grinding away. It's obviously frustrating when there's delays, but I think that in the service of getting this thing right and making sure that we've got everything that we need in it, we've been taking the time to be deliberate about this. We've had a little bit of a hiccup getting our engineer under contract. That has been rectified, and now we've got an engineer working with our designer on the site plan. Really, what kind of drives the conversation kind of moving into this stage of the RFP development is, when a change in the floor plan happens, that has cascading effects to the grading that's necessary for the site plan and vice versa. So there's a lot of iteration that goes on between the engineer and the designer, especially when you've got as topographically complicated a site as we have. So it's taken a little bit of time to really kind of iron out the site plan and make sure it kind of ties into the floor plan in a way that's going to be effective. But the design team is putting the finishing touches on the site plan that's estimated to be done by next Friday. In the meantime, we'll be working with the advisory committee to get some consensus on a building exterior scheme. What we want the building to actually look like. Cost is obviously a driver of that. So we've got a couple of concepts that our designer has provided. Those are being run through a cost estimator that our project manager is working with, and that information will go to the advisory committee for their consideration. The other thing that we need to make sure that we do before the RFP is finalized is you sort of do a final walkthrough of the program, the floor plan, the site plan, with our animal control officer and the Milton Animal League, who are going to be the primary operators of the facility. They've been involved at every step of the way. But again, we don't want to put something out there on the street that, suddenly, one of those parties looks and says, this isn't what we need. This isn't going to work for us. So that's going to be something that once we've got everything done, we'll do a final check with them. So that's where we are, making good progress every day. It seems I'm on the phone with our project manager, kind of trying to advance things. We are aiming to get to get an RFP out there and advertised on February 12th. It'll be out there for a month, and we've got maybe another month worth of review and contract negotiation plugged into the schedule there. So really kind of hoping for the early to mid June commencement of the actual project.
Thank you. Quick question. With the site plan coming in next Friday, would you want to have an update on it's the 17th, I believe. Would you want to have a meeting, an update at the select board meeting on that on the 21st of March? Or would that be too premature considering the other work that's underway?
Let me bring that to the advisory committee, because I think we're going to need to be very deliberate about how we kind of schedule advisory committee meetings, reports to the select board. We want to make sure that we're not leaving a lot of gaps between, meetings. We want to make sure that we get this thing kind of moving in a timely way. So they'll need to kind of work their schedule. I want to make sure that I'm coming back with actual information that's going to be useful and helpful to you, and not just, hey, we have a site plan. We have a meeting on Thursday. I'll report back to the town administrator and see if we've got enough to justify an update. Otherwise, I think it makes sense to just kind of knuckle down and get this RFP done. Because I think the next thing that we want to show you is really a recommendation for an RFP.
Thank you. Any other questions for Tim on this topic?
I will, but not at this time.
Okay. Thank you, Tim. We appreciate you.
Mr. Chair, one more thing that I wanted to mention. I mentioned that sort of we have building exterior concepts that are going through a cost estimator. The whole project is going to go through a cost estimation process, which is typical for these types of building projects. We understand what the budget for the project is. The work that the committee has been doing for the past year and a half has been, in service of really trying to drive down those costs. So what we're really, aiming for is for that cost estimate to come in, roughly at the budget that we understand the project to be at. If that cost estimate comes in above budget, that may be a situation where I'd like to come into the select board and kind of see how we want to proceed, because, obviously a cost estimate is different from the bids that you get when you put an RFP out on the street. But I think that'll be a sort of a key inflection point for the select board as to whether you want to proceed with an RFP if the estimate comes in, too far over the budget. That's not something we're necessarily anticipating. Like I said, the advisory committee has been working extremely hard, reducing the program, trying to, find every little bit of savings that we can. That's just, that I think would be something that would rise to the level of wanting to check in with the select board if we get that. But that's something that, again, I'll report to the town administrator about when we have a better idea of when that estimate's going to come in.
Okay. I think that's something the select board would want to entertain by all means. Thank you for that, Tim. Have a good night. And again, thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Have a good night, everybody.
Item number 16 is a recommendation from the Municipal Broadband Committee. Mike, can we turn to you, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This board issued a request for qualifications for a design of a new institutional network for town buildings. The town received 4 responses to the request for qualifications. The Municipal Broadband Committee, working with its consultant, Bruce Patterson of Entry Point Networks, and Mr. Milano, reviewed the applications and interviewed all 4 of the applicants over the last 3 weeks, 2 different sessions of interviews. And this morning, the Municipal Broadband Committee voted a recommendation ranking the 4 because it was the consensus view of the committee that all were qualified. All 4, Pike Telecom and Renewables, NB&C, Comtrack Corporation, and CTC Technology and Energy, that all 4 were qualified to do the work, to do the design for this network. But after review of the applications and the interviews, the committee has ranked them 1 to 4 and recommends moving forward with the company ranked first, but thought it would be helpful to rank them in the event that we can't reach an agreement with the first one. So,
can I ask just
a
question before you do? Because I think if you answer this, Mr. Chair, if it's all right, if you answer this question the right way, I'm just going to make the first rank. Was it unanimous? Did you all rank that one number 1, or was it kind of broken?
No, we all agreed on ultimately we voted and all agreed on the 4. And I'll tell you, we took a straw poll before we voted, and everyone came up with the same 4 in the same order. I would like to point out just for the record
Okay.
the reasons we did it because I think it's important. Just very briefly, the ranked order is we thought that Contract Corporation should be ranked number one, and that's who we should pursue for the design services. Ranked number two, and the reason for that is because of the local presence and the similar work for municipalities in this area, and that the local presence was very important to the committee members because of the nature of this work. It's important to have people on site, and so our view was that Comtrack was a little bit stronger in terms of local presence and the similar work for municipalities directly in this area. Number two ranked was NB&C. NB&C, in addition to being local, but maybe not having as strong a local presence as Contract, really emphasized the professional engineers they had on staff. That was a key emphasis of theirs, and the committee was taken with that, and so thought that they would be best to be ranked second. Ranked third by the committee was Pike Telecom and Renewables. The committee, again, well qualified, but a little bit lesser in terms of municipal hands-on experience. Does have a local presence, but in the close ranking, thought that Pike was third, and then the ranked fourth was CTC Technology and Energy, largely because of the lesser local presence. Right. That was the reason that CTC, although qualified to do the work, had a lesser local presence. So that's the ranking. So the recommendation of the committee is to rank them, as I said, those four, and to move forward with the contract.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to move forward with Contract. Is there an amount? Like, is there? No,
not yet. This is just a request for
I'll make a motion
clarification.
to move forward with the contract on this proposal.
Is there a second?
I will second that.
Thank you, Roxanne. Seeing no discussion, roll call vote. Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Musto?
Yes.
And Mr. Doyle? Yes. Thank you. Item number 17, committee appointments. We have the Climate Action Planning Committee, and we have also the Youth Task Force. Mr. Milano, can we turn to you for these?
Sure. These are the applicants that we had received when we posted the agenda on Friday. As I and Lynn had emailed out to the select board, we had received some additional applicants. Since that posting deadline, we distributed that information when we received it. We also included in your packet as reminders the charges with each of these groups. I'll note in terms of the Climate Action Planning Committee specifically, we did reach out to the School Committee, Planning Board, Conservation Commission, Chamber of Commerce, and Sustainable Milton in terms of if they had a designee yet. Had not heard back from each, although communicated with each of those boards, just to remind them that the select board did create this committee and we're seeking a member from each of their bodies. And otherwise, the materials that you have is the applicants we had.
Is there a motion on number 17 for the Climate Action Planning Committee?
Just, Mr. Chair, a quick question.
Yes,
How many are you appointing? I don't. So I just.
Yeah, I mean, we have one appointment.
Just one.
And the town administrator has one appointment, and then we have two other appointments with expertise in the area. So, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Please, Mr.
So
Zulus.
there may be some overlap because I noticed that some of the applicants that we have in our packet are members of Sustainable Milton. So I don't know if they would be the designee from Sustainable Milton or not. So so I'm not quite sure how to proceed absent having the designees from the other committees, particularly Sustainable Milton, because as I said, I think Ms. Dyke-Redman, Mr. Hasha, right, both members of Sustainable Milton may well be the designees.
Maybe we defer this to the next meeting so we can work out, maybe let the town administrator talk to them and figure out who wants to be who, so that we don't have to come back and do this again.
Right.
Like we appointed Mike, but he's already going to, let's, I personally, I have no clue, so I'm kind of listening to you, so I think just the fact that you brought that point up might make it wise for us just on this appointment to defer it and then kind of line up. That might give some of these entities that Nick just referred to get back to us. Here's who I want. Here's what, and that would minimize the list and make it a lot easier for us to make our designee. Just a thought.
Ms. Musto.
Thank you. I was going to say I do agree with that because there are a lot of very qualified people. I went through all of these applications, and there are a lot of really qualified people. But to your point, I also struggled with that because we have several that are on certain committees, some that we may not know when we get to the next grouping of people. And I would rather know upfront who their designees are for some of these, so that when we're looking at the rest of the applicants, we understand who their designee is when we're looking at them. So I agree with that.
That makes a lot of sense. Ms. Bradley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would also like to suggest that we put a close date for applications, since we got one earlier today at 11:12 a.m. that was sent to us, and that person is not included on this list. So I'm wondering if there's a way that we could put a deadline on this so that all the members of the town that would like to apply get their application in time.
You want to open it to more people than what we have now?
No, that's not what I'm saying,
Okay.
Richard, but there's somebody that we got an application for today at 11:12.
Oh, we didn't have a close date on this? Okay.
Correct. That's what I'm saying. I just want to make sure that it's fair. Like the guy who sent his application in today at 11 o'clock in the morning, he's not on our list. Well, he should be considered because he also wanted to apply. So I don't know anything about the guy. But I'm just saying there should be some way that we have a deadline on this so that we can look at who everybody else appointed. I completely agree with y'all on that one. But I think that there's got to be a time that we just stop accepting applications, that we can actually look at everybody who's applied.
How about a close date of Monday, March 13th at 5 o'clock? Would that be amenable to everyone? Or you want more?
Well, I was thinking, pardon me.
I'll take whatever you want.
I was thinking the 21st, and so we could do it the Friday before.
I was thinking, it's been out for, I think it's been out for a while. I mean, we have a lot.
Yeah.
If we need to extend it after that fact, we could, but to Ms. Bradley's point, we got something in today. I feel like we have a lot for both of them actually.
Okay.
So,
Why don't we give it the rest of the week then?
All right. How about Friday at 1 o'clock? How about Friday
Perfect.
at 1? What time do we close? 1:30 on Friday? What time?
1.
How about Friday at 1 o'clock? I don't know. I'm in the Mike zone. We're in the 9:15. I'm going into his zone tonight.
I think we can do this by consensus. And,
okay, I agree. Yeah, I think so.
In both points made by Roxanne and Aaron, standard best practices, namely, there's always a close date. And then if you're not satisfied by the close date, you can open up and extend it for an additional period of time.
Agreed.
Okay. And this brings us to...
So what's the close date? I'm sorry, did I miss that?
Friday at 1.
Friday.
It is Friday at 1 o'clock. So just so the townspeople heard that, this Friday, 1 o'clock, close date for the Climate Action Committee volunteer applications. Thank you. Just so it's clear.
Well said.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, 17B.
Alex Hasha did raise his hand, but I don't know if you want to
I don't think
entertain
you
it.
can. I don't think you can, right?
Yep. He may have some information for
From Sustainable Milton.
Oh, but can we? Can he speak if it's not on the agenda?
Well, it is.
It is on the agenda.
Because he's on the.
Yes, he's one of the names.
Well, he's on. He may be able to speak to the appointment of Sustainable Milton.
Go ahead. You want to
clarify that?
Yeah.
So, who was it? So, Mr. Hasher, if you're here to speak to Sustainable Milton, maybe you want to.
Hi, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, Alex. Thank you for being with us.
Yes, I was just listening in. I'm not sure that I can speak for all of Sustainable Milton tonight. We have discussed our appointments, and I think we were kind of in the same mindset that you were, that we wanted to understand more about who would be selected by the select board before we finalized our our choice. So if there's any way if it has to be sequential and sort of the decisions made in silos, then we can do that. But we weren't trying to delay the process. We were hoping to have it be more of a discussion, so we could see who you are sort of leaning towards putting on the committee before we finalize our choice.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Wells.
I think we just want to fill all the, if you have I'm speaking for myself, but I think if you have an opening and a person you want to fill, I think to Mr. Milano's point, the quicker you can get that filled in the name to him, the easier it makes it.
Right. I guess because we have two members interested in serving, we were interested to see if, we could get both those folks on. But
No.
we can get you an answer probably tomorrow, because we'll be meeting on this tomorrow.
Thank you, Mr. Zulus. Perfect timing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if I could make a suggestion with respect to these groups, perhaps Sustainable Milton and Alex, you could talk to the town administrator.
Yes.
And work it with the town administrator, because the town administrator has an appointment and the town administrator is aware of things. And so if you talk to the town administrator along with these other groups, that will help you, I think, in your decision.
Great. I'll reach out tomorrow then. Thank you.
Thanks for your contribution this evening. Nick, can we turn to 17A now?
Sure, Mr. Chair.
Youth
No,
Task Force.
17B. Yeah, 17B.
17B. Thank you. That was 17A.
So again, we had applications rolling in. Some of them did come in prior to, during some of the conversations about the youth task force at the end of last year. We did follow up with each of the applicants to confirm their interest before moving forward with their names on the agenda. These are the folks that we have received applicants for that were distributed to the board. And I will note, similar to the Climate Action Planning Committee, we did have a couple come in towards the end of last week. One individual who asked to be held at the moment, but kind of speaking to the Climate Action Planning Committee, we did see some of a similar pattern where there has been some applications continuing to come in.
Mr. Wells.
How many do we have here tonight? How many are we appointing? 2?
We have 9
We have 9 appointments to make that we can make tonight?
tonight. Yes.
From this list, we can appoint 9.
Well, there are different categories, right? So 3 are teenage residents, 3 are parents or guardians of teenage students, 2 would have professional experience in youth programming, 1 would be a member of the Milton Coalition, and 1 would be a member of this board. So I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure of 1 who fits in the category of the teenage residents, and I'm not sure
So
about the other. I'm not sure who fits into the other category.
what's the second category you said?
The parent.
3 parents or guardians. Yeah.
But then the third category you talked about.
2 members who have professional experience
Excellent.
or in youth programming.
I have one
And in
that
Milton of the Coalition, isn't there a member?
And that's that's the next one. A member of the coalition.
Yeah.
Right.
So I wasn't sure who that was on the list.
Right. I agree.
Doesn't seem that we need to do the same here and defer this until the next meeting and have an idea of what the fit is for the different.
So I have I'm with you. I have an idea for one category that I want to know, but I'm not sure on the others.
So what if we were to communicate our recommendations?
Yeah, that's a good
to Mr.
idea.
Milano?
Okay, I'm fine with that.
Bundle these both together in the same way, and then address them at our next meeting.
Okay.
And on top, just
Yep.
kind of,
We have Aaron and then Michael. Aaron and then Richard.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering if we can put together a spreadsheet to see what categories each one of these applicants would fall into. Some of them will fall into multiple categories. So, if we just put their name and then all these categories and then check the boxes for each ones that they fall into, that would really help me to determine from each category how many applicants we have for each one of these categories. For example, I know that a couple of these folks that applied are parents, but they're not parents of teenage children. So I'm not sure if that's the seat that they were thinking that they would apply for. I do know, at least on this list, that 2 of them are parents of teenage children. So that's great. But it would be easier for the select board, I think, if we had an actual chart of where these people tick the boxes for which ones.
And that would be a good prototype for when we have similar situations in the future as well.
Agreed.
Good recommendation. Thank you. Mr. Wells, did you have a
Michael's
comment?
first, I think.
I was just going to say one thing we could talk about is who from this board wants to serve on this committee. If we don't have to, but we could talk about that if people have an idea and they want to.
You and I have already done it.
Right. Right.
Why don't we give a little bit of time?
Yeah, let's get some time. Yeah, that's
to
a good idea because that could, yeah. Okay.
And I know that with respect to the Climate Committee, that Conservation Commission is, the chair has been talking about a candidate for the Conservation Commission for which there is not an opening at the present time, who might, based upon that person's background, be a good candidate to be the representative of the Conservation Commission to the Climate Action Committee. So I can get to...
So like a designee. Doesn't necessarily have to be a member. You're picking designee. I get that. That makes sense.
Exactly.
And to Ms. Bradley's point, I agree. I think that I want to make nomination. I want to put the category that I think they should be for, so we can kind of. So we're going to defer this until.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'll second what Ms. Musto said, which is the candidates that we're getting for both of these committees are just fantastic. It really tells you the talent that we have in this town when people are willing to participate in these committees. So it's really fantastic.
And credit too for those who are responsible for getting the word out, posted. That is a contributing factor and a very important contributing factor. We can't just assume that people know. Unless we tell them, they can't know. Yes, you're right about the community. Okay, item number 18. This is the investment policy second reading. We had this on our agenda at the last meeting, and this is a protocol.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the investment policy for the town of Milton.
Thank you. Mr. Wells, is there a second?
I will second.
Thank you, Ms. Musto. Is there any discussion?
Let's vote.
Seeing none. Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Musto?
Yes.
And Mr. Doyle, yes. And 19 is the 2022 annual report submission of the Select Board, which was, to her credit, authored by Katie Conlon, former chair of the Milton Select Board. And she produced a quite comprehensive, if not magnificent, document.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the 2022 annual report submission of the Select Board.
Is there a second?
I will second.
Thank you, Ms. Musto. Any discussion? Mr. Zulus?
Mr. Chair, the only thing, I should have sent this in early, but the only thing that I think we might consider adding is an acknowledgement, because it lists our name as submitting this report. If we had an acknowledgement that Ms.
I'm fine with that.
Ms. Conlon drafted this, I think that would be.
I think that's
either within the text or in a footnote.
At the bottom, like a comment on the bottom. Nice.
And we have the update on Lynn's title for this as well. Okay. Roll call vote. Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Musto?
Yes.
And Mr. Doyle, yes. Item number 22 is approval for the Discovery Schoolhouse Incorporated to conduct an environmental inspection and appraisal inspection on the Kidder Branch Library property located at 101 Blue Hills Parkway. And I believe we all had a related document in our packets for this as well. Mr. Milano, do you want to make any comment on this at this time?
Nope, just that they're just seeking that approval to move forward with the potential acquisition of that property from the town.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to approve Discovery Schoolhouse, Inc. to conduct an environmental inspection and appraisal inspection of the Kidder Branch Library property located at 101 Blue Hills Parkway in the town of Milton.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Musto. Moved and seconded. Seeing no discussion, we'll call vote. Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Musto?
Yes.
And Mr. Doyle, yes. This time, we move for discussion and approval, one-day liquor license application, Milton Food Center, 338 Granite Avenue, Milton, Mass.
Mr. Chair,
50th anniversary celebration events.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve a one-day liquor license application for the Fruit Center, Milton Fruit Center on 330 Granite Ave, Milton, for the 50th anniversary celebration events.
Okay, and there are 4 dates.
Oh, you're going to put them all down. Oh, yeah, so those are them. So, and those dates are May 6, 2023 from 1 to 4, May 13th, 2023 from 1 to 4, May 20th, 2023 from 1 to 4, May 27th, 23 from 1 to 4. And the good news is that probably all 4 of those days will be much warmer than it is today. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Is there a second, please?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Musto. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Mr.
the only thing
Lewis.
I would add, 50 years is an achievement to be in business, and I wonder if there's anything that the town could do to acknowledge it, or the town could send, I don't know, that
We could do one of our proclamations as we get
Yeah,
closer,
yeah,
maybe
that's-
present it on one of the
yeah,
days.
that's
Be great.
Pretty good, yeah. We'll go there. We'll go
Okay.
there. We'll go. After we're going to send you as our designee.
Pitch here, huh? Happy to do it.
You can have time in your hands.
Tell my wife that.
Yeah. I hear that.
I bet you do. Okay, we all do. Thank you for that. Moved and seconded. We are all set. And
Mr. ready to
we
vote.
don't need a proclamation until
No, we can do that later. We can do
We'll
that
move
later.
at it the second time.
Lynn, you get that? You make a note of that. We'll do a proclamation for.
Yep. And 22 is 2 meetings.
I think we need to vote. I think we didn't vote yet. I think we need to vote. We got sidetracked on that. In the proclamation.
apologies, yeah.
I was wondering about that myself.
So we
That's
need
why.
we need to
Okay,
vote.
so let us vote. Mr. Zulus.
Yes.
Mr. Wells.
Yes.
Ms. Bradley.
Yes.
It sounds like she's at one of them already. Joyful. Ms. Musto.
Yes.
And Mr. Doyle, yes. And I plan to be there. Thank you, Richard, for that nomination. So now, discussion and approval of meeting minutes, February 7th, 2023, February 13th, 2023. Any comments that anybody had on those meetings? I found them to be substantively on target.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes for February 7th, 2023 and February 13th, 2023.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Second, please.
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Musto. Seeing no discussion, Mr. Zulus.
Yes.
Mr. Wells.
Yes.
Ms. Bradley.
Yes.
Ms. Musto.
Yes.
And Mr. Doyle, yes. And 23, we turn to our town administrator for any updates that he would like to provide.
Sure, just a couple things. The pilot committee met last Friday morning to reconvene, check back in, and plan our next steps in terms of reaching out to the institutions and other entities in Milton in terms of potential payments in lieu of taxes going forward in fiscal 24. I attended the warrant committee on Monday night, or last week, excuse me, and we had several departments there on Monday night as they continue their work towards working through the budget and the town meeting warrant articles. I feel like I've highlighted these, but I'm going to continue to do so until we fill them all. Some open positions that we have right now. Our assistant health director position is open. With Bill Ritchie's upcoming retirement in April, our consolidated facilities director position has been posted. If anybody is interested, our civil engineer, as well as other positions down at Department of Public Works, is open, as is our IT assistant. So anybody looking for a career in the municipal world, please reach out. We'll be happy to have you. And in terms of new hires, we have a young woman starting in the building department next week. I'll announce her once she starts, and then Dominique Wright started in the library yesterday as their most recent new hire. So happy to have them, and I think that concludes my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Milano? The chair would just note that on Saturday, the 11th of March, this coming Saturday, the School Building Committee and the Conservation Commission will be meeting on 4 site visits, one at Kyle Road, one at Pope's Pond, followed by Randolph Herrick Drive, and then Randolph Avenue. And the meeting will continue after that in the Blue Conference Room at Town Hall. Moving on to the future meeting dates.
Mr. Chair, just one point, just 2 points, if I may bring them up on our reports.
Yes.
First, I think there were 2 deaths this week. I think one, we should say thank you to longtime NOAA Town Administrator John Carroll, who served there for so many years, but was of great assistance to town administrators and committees here for so long, especially the relationship that John Carroll had with John Cronin, our former town administrator, and the guidance that he provided. John, when I just think of my own career, John has provided expertise, people to come in and sit on committees for us, on screening committees. He was a big help to many people here. Many may not know his son Ted is one of our park commissioners, and if you saw BZ News today, it's quite a thing. He was well into his 90s, and I think he served there like 41 years in that capacity. Mm-hmm. The second one is on the Milton Police Department. This week they buried a relatively young officer, Ed Villard, who Ed served this department. His dad was a Milton police officer. His dad actually dropped dead when Eddie was only 10 years old. And Eddie and his sister Jean came on the police department in 1980, 77, right around 1980. Eddie was the first DARE officer in this police department. He was the first cop to work in the schools. He was a fixture. And anyway, grew up in East Milton. His young wife died 31 years ago. He had 2 young boys, Ryan and Eddie, and they were 2 and 4. He raised those boys himself, staying on the police department all these years. And unfortunately, because of some health issues he had to retire, and Eddie's gone way too soon. To quote the father, Stanton, who gave his homily at St. Agatha's on Wednesday, he told a great story about Eddie. Eddie lived on Libby Road right behind St. Agatha's, and he'd stand out on the corner sometimes in uniform at Squantum and Adams, and the neighbors thought he was just waving hi, and 4 or 5 cars would go by, and he'd wave hi, and the 5th car wouldn't stop. He'd go, pull over, give me a license, with the stop sign. On a closer note to all of us here, what many of you don't probably know is that the gentleman who was behind that wall right there, who services us every single week, Sean Doyle, is Eddie's nephew. Eddie's older sister, Kathy, is Eddie's sister, and Eddie is Sean's uncle, and was so a very close family. So, gone way too soon, but is in many who served multiple generations of serving this town. Eddie will be sorely missed and did a great job serving the town. So, thank you for that, Mr. Chair.
No, not at all. And I knew his father. His father was a terrible loss on a timely basis, and Eddie too young as well. And Ed made tremendous contributions in other respects to the town, one of which was in scouting.
Scouting, huge.
For decades, he was an avid promoter and supporter of young men.
Oh, yeah. Both his boys are Eagle Scouts.
Both his boys are Eagle Scouts. They and my son were all teammates in scouting, not only in terms of Eagle Scouting, but also in attaining religious awards.
Yes.
They're fantastic. So thank you for that, Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Future meeting dates?
Mr. Chair, if I may, just on public comment response, would it make sense to have Mr. Loffer in on the agenda to have a discussion at some point with respect to the local historic district?
When I was watching it.
Why don't? Yeah, we could do that.
Do you want to wait until he's like really ready before instead of
perhaps after they vote their report?
Yeah. They have work to do, and also they have to have their public hearings, and it might be good to have all of that take place and then have a summary report on the local historic district.
I tell you, we didn't know he was coming tonight. He just came for Citizen Speak.
He called. I can't remember what was this morning.
So it's too late to get on the agenda.
There is no difference between the two.
Because I thought as I watched his presentation, it sure seemed that he was prepared for some type of interactive discussion. Yeah. So I that's a good point, Michael.
That'd be great. So our future meeting dates, Tuesday, March 14th, Tuesday, March 21st, and we're having the 14th as an additional meeting, as was referenced a little earlier in the meeting, particularly with the warrant and budgets.
So quick question, the 14th I have a caught because that's my night week to teach because it was an off week. Are we going to meet just to vote some stuff? Do you think this is I know one of them is clearly going to be the budget.
That's the only one that I.
All right, so
I'm
if
not
it's,
Just
if
going to
it's,
be
a,
for that,
if
correct?
it's a short meeting, as long as I can do it by Zoom, I will be
Yes.
fine with that.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no need for us to convene.
And we'll do that at 7:00. That's good. I can do that.
And if I may, we're meeting Friday. And so even if we don't come to ground Friday, I think if we get close, Nick will, I don't want to presume, but maybe we could produce a document.
Yep.
So we can circulate a document Friday. And then if we finalize it Tuesday morning, then, as soon as we can. But in order to kind of prep everyone as best we can, we'll try to get something around Friday.
Okay. So if it's Tuesday at 7, I'm fine. I'll be in a short window, like a 30-minute window, but that will work for me.
Good. And then March 21st,
That's okay.
we have April 4.
Mm-hmm.
Then our quarterly meeting of the Stoughton trustees on April 10.
Okay.
And that will then bring us to the last meeting before the elections, Tuesday, April 18th.
Did you mean to say April 11th?
Yeah, I think
Did I say
I
April?
thought
typo
you
on the
said the
agenda.
10th,
Yes.
yeah.
It says 10th on the agenda.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's the
it
11th.
should be
It's the
11.
Yep.
Thanks for that. Roxanne? Got it.
Motion
So we're all
to
set
adjourn.
on that. I'll just review them very quickly again. March 14, March 21, April 4, April 11, and then April 18. Great. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
A second.
All right. Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Musto?
Yes.
And Mr. Doyle, yes. Good meeting. Much business done. Good directions.